My name is Pushpita Prasad. I am part of the board of CoHNA, the Coalition of Hindus of North America. We have Rishabh Saraswat, who is president of CoHNA Canada.
It's my absolute privilege to work for the cause which matter to Hindus in Canada.
Sudha Jagannathan, who is also on the board of CoHNA.
Very privileged to work with all of these wonderful people we have.
And we have Shawn Binda, our guest of honor.
I'm host of a YouTube channel called Hindu Lifestyle. I was born and raised here in Canada, and I am happy to be part of the panel today.
So, why are all of us here today talking about caste? We have actually spent a good part of the last several years fighting this sort of monster in the U.S., in Canada. And why do we fight it? Why is this such an important issue for us? Among the Indian community, there is a lot of misunderstanding on this topic, and that's partly what CoHNA has helped educate on for the past several years. Whenever we've had people get involved in this issue, they're generally responding to one trigger. Like today, we are responding to M-128, but it really needs to understand that where this is coming out from, this is a problem that has been building for years. We started in 2018 just because that is very specific to when it started in US and Canada. The roots can go back earlier, but since we are focused today here, and the reason this is important to see is many times in our community we don't pay attention to things that seem small and inconsequential, but each of these small actions has been building up to what we see today. So in 2018, an innocuous little survey came out, a very poor quality survey came out that everybody thought would go nowhere because honestly, it would probably not pass a Stats 101 class in terms of the lack of any academic rigor, the lack of repeatability, the lack of scientific basis for that survey. But this is where we are today, 5 years later. It led to a congressional briefing in the United States. And then in the months that followed, we started seeing a bunch of universities start to embrace this idea of there being caste discrimination, not just in India, but apparently in diaspora communities throughout the West. Ironically, Brandeis University, a private Jewish university, was the first one to get on the bandwagon. And in 2020, these are important issues to remember. In June of 2020, there was a book released by Elizabeth Wilkerson called Caste, in which she basically conflated the Indian caste system with Nazi Germany and the American slavery system. Obviously, only one of those three is assumed to be still alive. So the Hindu and the Indian American community, all Indian origin people all over the world, came very specifically under target. And then in June of 2020, California, which happens to be one of the largest states in the United States, as well as home to a very, very large Indian community, Hindu community, and home of the technology industry, which has global impact, filed a lawsuit against Cisco Systems, a massive global technology company, alleging that two Indian managers there had indulged in caste discrimination against one of their Dalit employees. I'm going to come back to that lawsuit in a minute because it's really critical for what we are seeing in Canada. But as you can see, the pins started to follow. A bunch of universities began to pass resolutions, and almost all the resolutions got accepted. This is the hearing Sudhaji talked about. This was one of our few wins where we were able to defeat the motion. But in the universities, given how much they are in the grip of progressive Hindu-phobic forces, it's generally been a losing battle. Whether it's UC Davis, whether it's the Cal State University, UC Harvard Graduate Student Union, Colby College. There are a few more that are missing here. And then we see the action shift to Canada. So in 20, and Rishabh if you want to chime in here, but Toronto School District Board was sort of the first salvo across the board, where the school district, ignoring everything else that's going on in it, decided that caste was a pressing issue. And this was something where the community again came together to fight, and we'll talk about it. But it continued to roll on. And in October of 2023, OHRC had actually made this into a caste policy. Meanwhile, we had a big win in California where SB 403 was introduced and then defeated. And I bring that up because this is really important for the Canadian community to learn from. And that's why Sutaji and I are on today. We are not experts about Canada by any means, but we definitely have a lot of learning from the fights that happened in Santa Clara County, in Seattle, and in California. That can be brought to help understand the playbook, to understand the players, and to help understand what's going on. So I'm going to stop a share, and maybe Rishabhji, if you want to talk a little bit about how this started in Canada, that would be great.
Thank you, Pushpita ji. So as Pushpita ji mentioned, TDSB bring about its motion against caste discrimination in February and March 2023. And it came as a surprise, and it specifically mentioned the Seattle and California's caste policies. And we know that Seattle and California's caste policies were sponsored by hate groups as Equality Lab. And it happened at the time when Hindu Canadians were celebrating Holi, one of the biggest festivals. But parents and the community members all came together, and we put forward our concerns about the motion itself. First of all, that motion which TDSB produced, it had the potential to isolate and discriminate against Hindu community because it singled out South Asian students based on so many false stereotypes. It said that it's based on people's last name, skin color, food choices, and whatnot. At some point, cursory mention of the marital choices were also made, not for the school kids, but also when generally talking about it outside in the media. Of course, there was a lack of data in that, and there are many more concerns we mentioned. We talked about how it is already is a caste is a protected category, and TDSB's motion agreed on that. It talked about it as a protected category, but still, caste is not protected category, but the discrimination under the of the caste discrimination is still covered under the Ontario's Human Rights Commission by the laws of ancestry. We also showed concern that how there are lack of transparency around this. We don't know what are the short-term goals. We don't know what the long-term goals are. We didn't know who are the actors are involved. It was all kept under the curtains. When we asked school board trustees or other trustees in the question period, they answered that they did not know or understand enough about caste, yet were in favor of this motion because they understood that widespread caste discrimination exists in Canada based on no report, based on no evidence. When asked if there has been any caste discrimination cases, famously, the trustee who bought the caste motion shrugged and said, "We have no idea." So we raised questions about the actors involved because we could tell by the language of the bill of the motion was very clearly taken from the Equality Labs manual. We could see the similarities in the language, and we questioned that. And we also saw Equality Labs and other organizations celebrating and echoing the points of TDSB's trustee making. We also pointed out that how just before this motion was brought about, there was a survey done of the students. And there were many problems in the surveys. First of all, it asked without prior consultation of parents or any community members, they distributed the children and they did this portrayal of, are you belonging to Adivasis, Bahujan, Punjabi, or Kashmiri as a distinct races and identities. Now, they are not talking, if you are talking about the South Asian identity, I could understand. There was no common South Asian identity. There was one South Asian identity, but there was a distinct Adivasi, Bahujan, Punjabi, and Kashmiri identity. What that means, there are only two communities in India. So this is problematic at many levels. First of all, when we are talking about identities so far, based on the region, based on the geographical identity, we are talking about what is the political identity of that field? Are you Indian by descent or are you Pakistani by descent? We can understand if you are talking about the broader region, are you South Asian by descent? When we are distributing people into the ethnic, diverse cultural mediums, then we need to ask how many communities they are ready to make, because there are so many geographical identities in India. There are Bengali identities. In UP, there are 6 to 7 distinct bridge identity, Awadh identity, and Chhattisgarh has a Bundelkhandi identity. They are not getting recognized. In the Middle East, they are not recognizing the Yazidi identity or the other ethnic identities. But here, specifically Kashmiri, Bengali, Adivasi, and Bahujan was inserted without any recommendation, without any academic backing for any of sort. So we questioned that. And we questioned that the approach of dividing nationality based on regional divides. What is the purpose of that? We didn't get any answers. There was inclusive. So these were many questions we raised. And we also raised that this is the time when Hindu phobia is rampant in Canada, why TDSB needs to bring this motion. And all these questions were first put down to the trustees. We reached out to trustees, and answers was many trustees agreed with our approach, including Dennis Hastings, Wedding Pei, James Lee, Mena Wong, and a Pakistani descent person named Zakir Patel. Zakir Patel famously said that we understand that if you will bring this motion, people will be confused by my last name, since you are mentioning last name here. He mentioned that he's a Muslim, and he said that he's a Pakistani descent Muslim. He doesn't see the reason for this motion to bring here because he doesn't know anyone specifically in the children. And it reiterated our position that Hindu Canadian children who came to Canada, they don't necessarily identify with the caste positions. They don't understand that until it is brought about in the school curriculum when they are taught about Hinduism. Then we went about, yeah, and we can talk about how we went to OHRC.
So in the chat, actually, I put a blog that was posted at the time. And, nothing like hearing it from the people who would be impacted. I would urge everybody to look at it. It was written by a young Canadian of Hindu faith who was born and brought up and actually studied in Toronto School District and wrote a very personal appeal on what this might mean. So I also want to just, so Shawn, I know we'd love to just hear what this means for you, because a lot of this gets wrapped up in the language of this happens in India, that happens in India, this identity from India. But the impact is, and this is, we know, a cover that people hide behind. Rishabhji mentioned the Hindu phobia that Canada has seen, and that also often hides behind the veneer of being anti-India political speech and hence being protected. And it's very interesting to note that why people like yourself, who are, definitely Indian origin, but several generations removed, what does it mean for, for your community?
So when this motion, when I first saw it as a tweet, I I started smiling to myself because I remember everything that happened in California, and I started thinking back to the first time I heard this word caste, and I kid you not, I'm working on my next video, and I literally sat down and I was 16 years old when I first heard this word caste, and you want to know where I heard it? In high school, through a textbook. 16 years being Hindu in Canada. My my dad, he founded Hindu mandirs here in the city. We participated in pujas. We did so much work as Hindus growing up. And the first time I hear this word caste, it is in a grade 11 world religions class that I'm doing, and I'm in French immersion. So I'm learning all this stuff in French. And the first thing that the teacher brings up is caste. And you start wondering, like, what is he talking about here? Is that he's saying that Hindus are split up into these four castes, and if you're part of this lower caste, then you're only supposed to be doing this and this. And I remember going home, and my brother is a year older than me, and I remember asking him, like, what do you make of this? He's like, it's just nonsense. And then you move forward now, and you go into university now, and you start reading about this more. And this is where I think the biggest problem that I have and members of my community have, and when I say my community, yes, it's the West Indians, but generally Hindus born here in Canada, this whole caste issue is a non-issue. And when you see things like this, what my biggest fear right now is that my own kids who are 3 years old and 6 years old, they're going to have a target on their back because people are going to see them as being young Hindu boys. And now, if all of this caste policies and issues come in, they're going to have a bullseye on their back. And the first question that they're going to get is not, where are you from or anything is that which caste are you? Because that means you're part of this caste. Therefore, you treat this person wrong. Therefore, we need to do something about that. That is the biggest issue. And I think the challenge that we also have is that because this has never been an issue for us, the education to members outside of the community is going to be that much harder because it's almost like we have blinders on our eyes because caste was never a problem growing up. You have friends from all over, whether they be in India or the Caribbean or Fiji or anywhere else. Caste never comes up. And now all of a sudden we have policymakers and people wanting to introduce bills or motions. And now you're kind of like looking around and you're like, so what caste are you? Are you part of this caste? Is this going to bother us? And the one issue that I saw most recently was within my own circle. I was speaking to my wife and I mentioned this thing and she's like, you're going to have to do something about this because people are not going to understand the domino effect that this is going to have. And I think that those are sort of the big issues that I think we need to address. And the second part of that is trying to answer the question is that, are you against anti-discrimination motions or bills? And how do we effectively answer that? And I think that popped up in one of the questions. And without even like going into it, is that a motion like this puts a bullseye on any kid that looks like me. And if they identify and if people know that they're Hindu, that profiles them. And that's a problem.
100%. You said it all. This, when we fought this bill in California, I was asked over and over again, why are you against a bill that advances the cause of civil rights? And Sudhaji is on, I would want her to speak next, is it is bad when people discriminate against each other. Are there cases of Hindus discriminating? Yes, of course, because Hindus are human at the end of the day, like anybody else, and we have bad apples among us. Is there any evidence of systemic discrimination on the basis of caste? None. And the word is systemic because I think, we come from a good place. People are coming from a good place. They want to do right. But one incident, even if it has been, does not mean the community is put in the dock. And that is effectively what these policies do. It's very important to understand why these policies, even when they come couched in the language of human rights or civil rights, are actually dangerous because what they're saying is one community is more likely to discriminate, be hierarchical, or be oppressive than every other community around it. That, my friends, is the textbook definition of racism. And that's why we have always said these are laws that profile a community, single them out, and discriminate against them. And while individual on individual discrimination is bad and means it may already exist to tackle it, when a state entity singles out a person or a community based on their origin and discriminates against them, that is very, very dangerous and a very slippery slope. So I also want to the other question that came up was, why, which you kind of addressed already, is why is this a problem when Hinduism is not mentioned? And I'd love for you to address that, Shawn, if you have thoughts on that, because all these bills, they generally don't call out Hindus or India or anything else.
The answer that comes to my mind is that if you look at through the series of how people learn about Hinduism, the minute you hear the word Hinduism, because of the years of those who are in academics, what they choose to speak about, caste becomes part of that conversation. And it's unfortunate because the experience of people like myself is that there isn't that notion of being Hindu means that you are casteist or anything like that. And the speaking that word caste, like every time I hear it, it always comes back to that one word, is that people hear caste, they immediately think about Hindus. And yes, you can say is that, oh, caste exists with Hindu Christians, caste exists with Indian Muslims, or caste exists, in all these areas of society, but that is not who they are speaking about. They are always speaking about Hindus when the word caste comes up. And when this motion was introduced, I'm on Reddit and I went to the subreddit for Canada. And literally, you go into these threads just a few days ago, and you could see the inherent racism that is in those threads. And it shocked me. It shocked me because, and this is what's going to happen with this motion is that, and people don't realize this, is that they don't realize this is that you say one thing and it connects to another and it connects to another. And all of a sudden there's all these little things that connect and it leads to the labeling of people like myself, a Hindu born in Canada, that by his nature of being Hindu, he is literally discriminatory. And I have a problem with that.
And of course, the association that your colleagues and people on Reddit made is not an accident. That's what I was just sharing, right? There has been a deliberate multi-decade strategy to keep Hinduism very strongly associated with caste. And this is what we put out in our initial tweet, right? The dictionaries define caste as a Hindu system of hierarchy. Search engines define. Every expert, every media article that is written about these laws, these so-called neutral laws, quickly talk about Hinduism and caste. So there's a very deliberate multi-decade strategy to associate Hinduism with caste, and that's why you, and when you were 16, learned about the word caste in the context of Hinduism. And that was the and what you faced and what your children you fear will face and what the reaction you heard on Reddit is exactly the outcome that has been desired. So that is for there was a question that why how should I answer it, and that is really the fundamental thing is if you wish to tackle civil rights, human rights, please fix the understanding of this concept, and then you can once you turn it into a neutral concept, I'm sure we'll be happy to get behind it as well. In California, just for a little bit of history, the people who pushed for SB 403 were the exact same set of players who a decade ago in 2013 had fought the Hindu community bitterly when the community had tried to get the textbooks corrected. The textbooks in US are very similar. They associate and they actually start in 6th and 7th grade and they teach caste as only Hindu. So in 2013 to 2015, when the Hindu community said, hey, give a more holistic understanding of Hinduism, it's not just caste, the same equality labs and players who today go around saying caste is a neutral word fought to keep caste associated with Hinduism. And a decade later, they pretend it's a neutral word. So I think we should very clearly challenge anybody who says caste is a neutral word. I want to go over to Sudhaji and tackle this other issue that people have in the back of their minds is this just a bunch of upper caste people pushing back because this is the equivalent of racism. You are the whites in the situation. Of course, as a white person, you will say, I don't see racism. I have grown up my whole life. I've never seen racism. So, Sudhaji, what would you answer to that?
That's a very good point because if you are a Hindu, stand up as a Hindu and you oppose these kinds of things, you're automatically labeled upper caste, and without any research or detailed look into that particular person's profile. But the thing is that you can't tell a person's caste by looking at them. Of course, if you look at my name today, I put Bahujan there. And I have to say, it's something new for me. I started to put that because at CoHNA, we have a few leaders who are very outspoken on this particular issue. We stand up as Dalit and Bahujan. And the reason we do that is because these promoters of caste all over the world, and particularly in North America, co-opt Hindu identities for their own purposes of hate mongering and targeting Hindus. And so to counter that, we stand up and say, you don't speak for us. We can very well speak for ourselves. And I stand up as a Bahujan because we are also part of an organization called Apna DB in California, which is started by the, Dalit Hindus, leaders. And the reason they had to, again, form that organization is to counter this accusation that anyone opposing caste policy is an upper caste. We are not upper caste, right? And who cares about caste? I've lived in California for 40 years, raised 2 kids here. My kids have no idea about this topic. I myself, I have to say, I did not have any idea either. I just lived my everyday life. But now I am standing up with these identities because it's specifically taken to shame us. So that's the first thing I would say. They use the word caste because for decades, maybe centuries, that word has been used to shame us, humiliate us. Even recently in my high school WhatsApp group in India, where there are only 2 Hindus and the rest are Christians and Muslims, one person came and said, what about untouchability? So of course, I gave her a good answer and she is quiet now. But my point is that there is no community that is free of discrimination, right? We are all human beings. But to accuse us of a particular kind of a atrocity that we apparently practice every day, well, show us the proof of this, right? Without any proof, promoting policies cause more harm. And if the idea of these government bodies and school boards and all that is to dissolve caste consciousness, right? They're going about it the wrong way. Now, me having to put Bahujan means it's sort of built up, right? It's now firmly put in cement that I'm a Bahujan, I'm practicing some sort of lower caste victimhood thing. I'm not doing any of that sort. So I do agree with you, Pushpita. they attack us. And let me also say, the promoters of these policies, we find that mostly they are not Hindu. Okay, they may have had some past ancestry of Dalit, and so that's what they're claiming. But there really is no caste certificate in the United States or Canada, and so how can they come up and say, I support this? And if you look at their websites, they, like Rishabh Ji called out, they only support certain categories of people and never Hindu. So my problem is that the selective application of who can be discriminated, that's what this policy is about. Who should be discriminated? Who is a government body to determine this? That taxpayer funds should be applied for government sanctioned discrimination of some people because they've been sold a bunch of goods about the fact that the Hindu community is doing something wrong. But prove it. Okay, in California, CoHNA offered the governor funding, seed funding, to do a survey. Of course, he never accepted, but thankfully he vetoed it. I think we are ready to do that in Canada. We are offering it towards the Don Davies, right? MP Don Davies. Hey, take our offer. We'll be happy to do a survey in Canada. And if you think there is a problem, deal with it. But if there is no problem, you need to back off because the current policies already provide protection. So just standing up and saying we don't support this doesn't make us upper caste or privileged. And Pushpita and Rishabh made a great point earlier. The ones who have privilege are the promoters of these policies because they have access to the decision makers and policy makers, and they do a lot to take advantage of it. Whereas we are people without the privilege. We are here on this forum trying to educate the rest of the community on why we need to stand up. We do not have privilege. The promoters, I'm calling them caste police, caste Gestapo, they have privilege.
And I just want to talk about impact a little bit because one thing everybody who starts learning about this topic needs to realize in the United States, the one casualty that this caste fight has had so far has been that of a Dalit warrior, Milind Makwanji, who lived right here in California for decades. And he fought bitterly. This is a picture. He fought bitterly against SB 403. This is a picture of him in a wheelchair. He and Sudhaji were both there in Sacramento. He was there at 5 a.m. After some very serious surgery because he, as a Dalit Bahujan, wanted his voice to be heard by the people who were claiming to champion his cause. And he ultimately passed away in July 2023. Again, after a city hall hearing on the topic of caste, and his last words were, "Don't talk about us without us." And I think that is what is happening here is that the Hindu community has not engaged with its stakeholders publicly. And so we have a whole bunch of privileged players, whether they're academics, media people, lawmakers, who are presuming to know us more than we know ourselves and who tell us who we are, who our identities are, and they're generally influenced by very Hindu-phobic players. So I think that is something to keep in mind is that many of us are defensive on this topic. I would suggest looking up resources. Shawn has a wonderful channel that explains what the Hindu identity is. CoHNA has a page which we have dedicated to academic and resources, personal testimony, and a lot of research about this topic of caste. There is no alternative to getting educated about it. So I want to quickly have folks talk a little bit about the impact of this because sometimes this all sounds very academic. What does this have to do with my day-to-day life? And that's why I wanted to start with Milind Makwanji, who actually paid the ultimate price fighting this thing. And also really quickly on Cisco, if any of you want to talk about it, but the Cisco lawsuit was sort of the linchpin used. Shawn, you talked about Reddit and going on it and finding the horrific posts and threads that you found. And I found the same thing happen right here in Silicon Valley. When the Cisco lawsuit was filed, tech colleagues and tech teams that had never discussed caste suddenly became an expert on caste. And all tech workers in Silicon Valley were deemed guilty on the basis of this one allegation, which, by the way, everybody on the call needs to know. That lawsuit was thrown out ignominiously by the California courts last year against the individuals. Yet, all the policies that have been passed using that so-called allegation of discrimination remain in place. And just a couple of weeks ago, the court sanctioned California Civil Rights Department. Note the word Civil Rights Department was sanctioned by the California courts for bringing in what we effectively call was a witch hunt against two individuals. Now, it's not a large number, but it's the principle that matters. And it's really significant when, I'm not a lawyer, but it's really significant when a civil right department, the scale of California civil right departments faces sanctions. That is it kind of shows you how the case was nothing but a made up witch hunt. There is an amazing website called Caste. Everybody should look that up. It's a frightening witch hunt of what Sundar Iyer and Ramana Kompella faced. They are the two Indian Americans that were the target of this witch hunt. And effectively, when Shawn, we were talking about identity, right? That you're scared your kids will be given identity. That's already happened because the state of California told Sundar Iyer, an avowed atheist. The man had published blogs in his college days saying that he was an atheist. He did not believe in organized religion. Yet the state said, by your last name, you are an Iyer. That means you're a Brahmin and a Hindu. So your fundamental agency as an individual to be who you are is being taken away by these policies. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that a little bit more.
It's a scary thought. That is a very scary, scary thought. I remember reading about the Cisco case and just trying to put yourself in that position where I find that myself now, like people see me and then they say, okay, so Shawn, I do have an English name, which is a whole other story, but trying to label people based on what they eat, based on their name, the fairness of their skin or the color of their skin is so inherently wrong that we should not even this should not even be up for conversation. And when I heard about the case, it makes you wonder how far are these people willing to go with this? And why is it putting a label on anyone that wishes to identify as being Hindu, as being inherently discriminatory? It's unfortunate that what happened in the Cisco case happened, but I see it actually continuing because we need to stand up right now. We need to make sure that members of our community are educated on why we have to push back.
Absolutely. Rishabji, anything to add there?
Yeah, first I wanted to address that it's not true that Hinduism is not mentioned in some of these bills and motions. Burnaby caste motion, for example, did mention that caste originates from Hinduism, and then it spread everywhere like some sort of a seed just spreads out everywhere. I don't know what. But also talking about the Hindu trauma, is it fair that, and because we are involved in advocacy and we get to know about the cases, how Hindu girls in the schools are bullied and called retards because of their red dots? I mean, why is it so troubling is because it started from Canada's biggest school board deciding to label our children first. So that was the call for it, and rightfully all the Hindus stood up against it. But still, some children are made fun during lunchtime because of they eat weird food or they smell or whatnot. And we are having, and of course, when they talk about each other's identities, then they talk about their skin color, their dress, their accent, their goddesses, idolatry, and whatnot. And what does state and all these policies do? Add up to it. Add more. We will profile you based on your last name, your food choices. This is just beyond, I would like to address, but also referring to celebrate our festivals, we see our government agencies go out. It was the first time that Canada's Environment Commission issued a warning about the air index pollution on Diwali festival, not on any other celebrations, like 6-7 other celebrations happen in Canada. They were never mentioned. So first, when children who do not recognize themselves as belonging to caste, and they are puzzled already by questions about caste, putting them in this position attributing a caste on that is based on their last name or what their parents or ancestors' profession was, what they used to do, is so very wrong. And agony of Hindu children needs to be recognized by state, and we need to talk more about Hindu phobia than labeling us more. Consequences of caste policies, as we Pushpita ji and Sudha ji talked about, is very real, as we saw in Sundar Iyer case. But irony is that Sundar Iyer's case, the lawsuit itself, was used as an evidence for so many emotions by so many universities and cities. Are they going to take that back now because they use that motion, that lawsuit as a evidence? Because there is a lawsuit, there might be some discrimination. So now that lawsuit is bust. Are they going to take back those motions? That sorry, we profiled you wrong.
Yeah, and I think again, in case people wonder that this seems academic, what it will, we will be doing this as a series of education. This topic is too big to cover today. But again, what counts as casteism in the West is very innocuous stuff. Your dietary choices. So it's actually interesting. One of the markers of caste is supposed to be skin color. I'd love to challenge everybody looking at this screen to tell us what castes we all belong to based on our skin color and maybe put us in a hierarchy. Because there is a dangerous conflation of caste and race that is happening, and that is what makes a lot of your a lot of your neighbors and colleagues who don't know much about India or Hinduism buy into this narrative. There is a conflation of diet. Vegetarianism is being termed as a caste marker. I'm going to share a little evidence that was evidence, quote unquote, that was presented in Seattle as evidence of casteism, where a gentleman is from the Jain community talks about Jains as being militant vegetarians. I was the first time I had ever heard the term, and I still can't get over it. But in a world that is increasingly dangerous, this is what taxpayer-funded authorities choose to care about. So I want to switch gears a little bit because we could keep educating on the issue, and we will be back with more education. But I also want to talk about what we can all do to address it. So, Shawn, I'd like to start with you because not specifically on caste, but you have noted this problem for a while, and you have dedicated a good amount of your time to tackling a lot of these misconceptions around Hinduism. And that sort of all wrap into this larger story that even Rishabhji was just explaining a couple of minutes ago.
So what needs to happen on the ground level is education is key. As I said earlier on, a lot of the Hindu Canadians who spend a long part of their life here, they have blinders on their eyes where they're not seeing this as an issue. So the first step, and I think I mentioned this to members of the panel as well, is that we need to reach out to these individuals, whether it be in person, find out who we can speak to at various mandirs or other organizations where we can have one-on-one sessions where we can speak about this. Because to understand the issue, you need to take a step back and trace how we did here on why this is an issue for Hindus worldwide. It's something that when I saw this motion that I told myself that there's going to have to be a lot of work done. I am working personally on a video right now on caste. I have been approached previously to actually do a video on it, and it just so happened that when I started thinking about doing this video, this motion came and I said, you know what, this is the right time for it right now. The other thing that needs to happen is that Hindus from around the world now need to join together to fight this. Because whether you are an Indian Hindu or you're a West Indian Hindu like myself, this motion doesn't do anything to say, oh, this is an Indian only problem. And I think Hindus like myself, they view it that way. So Hindus from the Caribbean or Hindus that are born and spent the majority of their life in Canada, the first thing that they're going to say, oh, this is an Indian problem. And the example that I gave with my kids is I'm like, this is going to happen to them because they're going to be seen as Hindu and that association is going to be made. So what we need to do right now is start galvanizing. We need to start our march towards education. And it is through education that everyone is now going to see why this motion is a problem. So personally, that is what I'm going to do. And I know CoHNA has a lot of work planned, and I hope that moving forward, we can get more and more people to understand why this motion poses a problem for Hindus, regardless of your ethnic background.
Pushpita, can I add something here? I just want to say that education, as Shawn said, pays off big dividends. So recently I posted this particular event on my Facebook, and a Caucasian friend of mine who's on my Facebook came and said, "This is so interesting because our school removed it completely." And so I went back to her and said, "What happened?" And she said, "The Hindu community, this is a Midwest state, okay, and that we are talking about. The Hindu community there got together and went and had a discussion with the school and said, this has terrible negative connotations. It's dangerous and harmful to the Hindu children in school. This has no place in the curriculum." They removed it. So that's a great example of activism by parents. Secondly, I give you an example in San Ramon, California. Huge Hindu population in the high schools there. And a parent found out that the school was doing a play, right? A caste game. So the parent went in and talked to them and said, "I don't know what you're trying to do here, but this has no place here." School stopped it. We have had conversations with public and private schools where this kind of conversations have happened. And when we have a good conversation with them, they back off. We have had students, Hindu students, who stand up and say, "I don't like all of the stuff you're talking about when you speak about Hinduism. You never talk about the reason for Europeans to find a way to India, and why Hinduism has a lot of appeal even today amongst amongst everybody." And then the teacher says, "Then you teach the class." And the student says, "Yes, I will." And she or he prepares and teaches. We just need to be more engaged. Okay, we cannot sit back and say, "Oh, Shawn is going to do his video, CoHNA is going to do my job, I can go have my coffee and chai." No, no, no. You need to be in the game. It's the time right now to be in the game. This is not one just in Canada, just in United States. This is around the globe. And just imagine if California had passed that law. If California had passed that law, you would be drowning in caste policies across the continents, okay? Because there is a big agenda to bring us down. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. I'm just saying, stand up. Don't shy away. You have nothing to be worried about or be ashamed of by standing up for your identity. Teach your kids to be proud of your identity and counter it everywhere. Thank you.
I will just say one thing that, sometimes when we speak up, we want instant success. That's not the point of the discussion because, for example, a child in school, if they challenge the caste nonsense that is being, and I know it's a lot to ask of a child, so maybe we can look at a person in a corporate setting, right? And you're sitting in a corporate setting and they're talking about doing in business internationally or something, and they bring in caste. If you challenge it right there as an employee, you may not change, you'll likely not change the trainer. What you're doing is you're making sure that the other attendees in the training see that you as a person with knowledge of the culture are challenging that assertion. So too many of us just keep quiet and nod along because we know we're not going to be able to change the trainer. The more of us speak up on any topic, the more this movement starts to build and the more we feel empowered to take on something more. But Rishabh ji, do you want to talk to us about some of the steps that can be taken specifically in Canada and what has been done and what could be done?
Definitely. I would encourage MP Don Davies and maybe even challenge a lot of these agencies that do a caste survey in Canada and punish us if we are guilty of something, but spare us if we are not. Do a scientific survey, analyze what's the problem. If not, I want to ask them, what is so pressing need that misleading references have to made for all the gymnastics have to be used because this agency did it, that's why we are doing it. Because this agency did it, that's why we are doing it. We see that happening nowhere. This is not credibility that because this agency is doing it, that's why we are doing it. Where it started, they started with some evidence which doesn't exist now, but you're not examining that. Why are you not looking at the concerns which we are talking about The real implementation concerns are not only on Hindus, but are on state itself, because it's incredibly hard to keep track of castes of people, and how to identify people's caste and how to assign people caste itself it will adds millions of dollars to the taxpayer, because you need a whole ministry. Like in India has a ministry which keeps adding up many castes and lists caste, and moves them what is lower and what is higher based on their economic category. Have you done any sort of work, or are you relying on Indian laws living in Canada? What's happening here? Also, when we are talking about when laws are explicitly talking about that caste is coming, how is this racist notion that South Asians are bringing caste with them to Canada? How is it allowed in today? How is it even allowed to be talked about in policies, in the motions? And why there is a lack of inclusive dialogue when you are mentioning that Hinduism is this, Hinduism is that, offline and online, and also the sponsors of your motions. I will explicitly mention Professor Chennaiya Jangam of Sedan has been involved in a lot of caste fights academically in Canada. And he has been on rant about Hindu-phobic rants on live camera, on Twitter, and there is ample evidence of that. How are these actors allowed to be part or be the voice talking about caste? But Hindus whose fate is being decided, they are not a part of the conversation. Where is the inclusion of dialogue? Where is that inclusivity when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Where is the inclusivity of Hindus? Why there is disregard of Hindu trauma? Why, if that is so pressing, why is it that no Canadian agency so far has talked about Hindu phobia, while in US city after city and MPs after MPs have done the resolutions? So right thing for our lawmakers is to pass Hindu phobia resolutions. And I would appeal all of our Hindu community members to join the movement. And it will not be solved just by WhatsApp activism. It will not be solved by Twitter activism. You have to reach out to your lawmakers. Believe us not, whenever we reach out to our lawmakers, they always say that this is the first time we are hearing this. Why is it that the fate of Hindus are being decided by these lawmakers and these agencies, and they don't hear from us? Because when we are reaching out, we find out that nobody talked to them. So educate yourself and be part of the movement, be part of the CoHNA, support us, send an email to the lawmakers. And if you are not articulate enough to put all those points, we have the team who works for it, be part of it and send. We do the email campaigns. You all have to do is sign that campaign, ask us how to reach out to lawmakers. Sudhaji is there and I am there. Pushpitaji and whole team is there to help you in that. And so many other people in CoHNA Canada.
So I want to just say that this is a hard fight. I'm sharing what happened in California, and we met with like 50 plus lawmakers, and this is only CoHNA. This is obviously there were many other organizations working, but we personally met with 50 lawmakers in California, and getting each meeting is a lot of hard work. We met 200 individuals from California that were part of CoHNA, participated in grassroots activism. We did 30 seminars and sessions on educating the community. 125 temples signed on to this, and I think more than 15,000 emails were sent, and that was only in one state over 6 months. So Canada will be no less intense, and I think the community needs to gird up for a long fight. CoHNA will definitely help. We will provide a letter that you can start sending. We don't have specific dates, but we will be sending you tools and creating platforms for education and for action. But ultimately, we have to take action. There is no substitute for action, and it is nobody else's job. There is no team or army sitting ready to jump in. We are the team. We are the army. And the message of the Gita. I always refer to the Gita. Arjun, when he asked for advice, Krishna's advice was not, "Hey Arjun, go and do a havan, go and do a puja, or go and hang out with your family. I'll fix everything." The advice of Bhagwan Krishna was, "Hey Arjun, you gotta do your karma. You've got to go do the work that you need to do. Nobody else is going to do it for you." Shawn, would love to hear from your thoughts on this.
What you said is exactly right. If we don't do anything right now, there was a Q&A question about diaspora youth or people that are in that that slowly people are disconnecting from their heritage. So to use my own sort of ancestry and upbringing as an example is that we didn't have a savior, we didn't have a hero. And if you trace Hinduism throughout the Caribbean and now even here in the Toronto area, we didn't need someone from outside to come help us and preserve our own identity, our culture, our way of life. It took regular individuals like ourselves finding it within themselves to make that difference. The one scary thing that is always on my mind is all of these outside policies that are getting generated from people that are not Hindu will cause the youth growing up here to disassociate themselves. And if we can't fight that, then what are we here for? That is one of the reasons for the education, for being on social media, for being on YouTube, is that we need to find the voice of ourselves here in Canada so that disassociation doesn't happen. We can't be viewing that Hinduism is something that exists only in India. Therefore, I have no part of that because I'm a Canadian now. Is that you could be Canadian, you could be Hindu, and we need to be setting what that narrative is right now. So to everyone that is listening in on this, it is important that you reach out to people within your own circle. I'm not asking you to go out and start protesting it and holding signs. The first step that has to happen is bringing this to everyone's eyes and finding the words in your own way to express why this motion is wrong. If everyone can make that effort today, that will be one huge step that when we get together as a group, this motion will be stopped.
Yeah, and so again, this is a complex topic. Please sign up for Shawn's YouTube channel if you've not already done it. Follow him on Twitter, follow CoHNA Canada on Twitter, follow CoHNA on Instagram, Facebook, in WhatsApp, YouTube. I think we're on all the popular social media channels. So please, and we have a very comprehensive website. It's almost, I've been told it's a little overwhelming. I wish there was less content. There's actually a lot I haven't put in there. So take your time to go through it because honestly, caste is such a complicated topic. You will find books by by professors. You will find scholarly articles. You will find heartfelt personal testimony from people of many different backgrounds talking about it. Shawn brought up his kids over and over again, and I think it's so important. You'll find an article there from one of CoHNA's members who's also Bahujan, and she talked about how shocked she was, just like Shawn talked about his kids, right? That her son was getting ashamed. She is very proud of her background. She's Bahujan, but she's real, and she's very proud of her family, what her family has achieved. And she was shocked to see that her son, thanks to the school books, was now putting himself on a social hierarchy at the bottom of a social hierarchy that she had never mentioned. Her community around the kid had never mentioned, and certainly did not exist except in the figment of these privileged ivory tower academics who are actually pushing it down onto us. So this is a fight for our families, for our kids, for our cultural roots. So there is really no time to sit on the sidelines. And at the very least, I hope everybody who has attended today will go sign up for all this information and commit to a learning process that will make all of you feel more empowered and educated to start fighting back. We understand it's a tough fight. And but it is absolutely winnable, as Santa Clara Human Rights Commission showed, as California's SB 403 showed. You got to get in there and get going. I mean, we as in the Hindu community did do 4 in-person demonstrations, by the way, in California over the 6-month period. So don't rule that out. Don't rule out any toolkit, but get in there. So I think we're over the hour.
I want to address 2 points before we wrap up, Pushpita ji. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to go through the questions if there are any left, but go ahead, Rishabh.
Yes, the first of all, we need to understand that when time comes, we will definitely involve community, what is needed. Right now, I just want to tell about this motion. At least there is no need for panic right now. There's not very urgency. But we need to be vigilante about what kind of motion anywhere is bringing, and be careful about it. But right now, as now, this motion is not going to the parliament at least till this fall or next year. So it's not, we need to be careful if they are not ramming through it, because as Pushpita ji mentioned, that because of the privilege and access these actors have, they try to get them through really fast. And we need to be very, very swift in our action. And there comes the second point, that a lot of people in our community, they think that, any policy against discrimination, what is harm in that? And that's a fair point, that of course, we all are against any sort of discrimination, and we will be of any discrimination getting banned. What's the harm in that? But look beyond that. Look what they are targeting. What is the implication of that? And that's what we talked about in the whole session. And we can give more information about it, how it has harmed, as you have seen in Sundarayya's case and many more cases such like that. And also the real life consequences, kids getting dissociated with their last name, and also then their identity, and then they're from Hinduism, which is already such a hostile environment in Canada right now. And somebody made a really important comment, like, don't think just because you are a Canadian, uh, you will be saved somehow. So look what's happening with Jews in Canada. And I would see that is a really fair comment, because TDSB, if everybody is following what is happening in TDSB right now, situation has reached a point that just being a Jew is almost a crime in Canada right now. And if you don't believe me, you go and connect with any Jew children, parents, what they are going through right now. Read media reports. The pattern, how the singling out of Hindu community is happening, is almost similar. So we wish that doesn't happen every day, and we wish doesn't happen with any other community, or including Hindus or outside Hindu. Nobody should be discriminated on any basis. But if discrimination happens somewhere, for example, in the case of the BC tribunal, the person who was sitting with Don Davies, irony is that he was already rewarded. He won the case without any caste motion. So if they won, why do you want to wear a hat over a hat? Why is there such a need? So that's all the questions our community need to answer, need to question. Why is it happening? Is it happening because they want to target Hindus? Ask this question to your lawmakers.
Also, Rishabh, are you going to have more sessions and invite guests who can articulate more on these things?
Of course, absolutely. So Daji, and we will definitely do this.
Excellent point by Rishabhji, that the very case referenced by MP Don Davies shows that there is no need for a caste motion to get justice for people who may be discriminated, because discrimination does happen. We started the session by acknowledging that it could happen. We are sorry when it happens, and we wish the people get justice. We're happy for the gentleman, Mr. Jangu, who got justice. But it is also evidence that you don't need a caste specific motion to get justice. And that actually was the fundamental reason why SB 403 was vetoed in California, is that the governor of, I know it's a totally different state, different system, but said the same thing. The discrimination, if it happens under caste, is already covered under plenty of existing laws. So I think that we need to build on this understanding that we are not against protection for discrimination, but we do not want a law that discriminates against us in the guise of social justice. That is a very fair ask. There is nothing to be defensive on that. So just closing words from everybody. Let's keep it short, since we have to be, our audience has already spent over an hour with us. So Rishabh, anything to add?
Join CoHNA, join our movement, follow CoHNA's .org decolonize page, follow Hindu on campus, look for caste files, a website Pushpitaji mentioned, and follow all the reports which are, it's very important to be educated and be involved with CoHNA Canada's efforts, on ground and online, both. Thank you.
Shawn, over to you.
For those that are interested in following my work, you can find me at hindulifestyle.ca. That leads straight to my YouTube page. I'm also on Instagram at hindu.lifestyle.official. So that's where you can find me. But also for anyone that is listening in on this, whether you watch me or you read something else, the important thing is to speak to the people that you know, so that they are made aware of what this is and what we need to do. Thank you.
Sudhaji, final words from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with everything that everyone has said. But one thing is that I would ask all of you with children to encourage them to follow Shawn, because my daughter will ask me, Mom, where do I find the Hindu news? Good question. Where do you find the Hindu news that impacts people like us? Well, one place is Shawn. So please have them tune in there, because young people listen to young people. And then we're going to have more of these sessions. We'll bring more different kind of guests who can speak about why this bill doesn't accomplish what it's supposed to. So watch out for that. Join us. Please come in and lead some of these efforts. Canada is a big country. We would like to have people in Vancouver, in Toronto, and in Prince Edward Island to come in and join us in this particular effort. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we'll wrap it up with that. Thank you everybody for your time. This is going to be the start of a conversation and a campaign. So we hope to see many more of you connect with us on all the channels that were mentioned, and let's get educated. Let's get going. There is no alternative to speaking up for yourself. There is an old saying that, in the game of the hunter always gets to tell the story of the lion. So let's get off the table. Let's stop being on the menu and let's sit at the table and tell our own stories. Thank you very much. Namaste.